everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining. And this is our fifth session, and I'm very happy that we are learning more and more techniques about comic drawing and having fun together. We already learned how to draw an avatar portrait with facial expressions and a half body portrait, which includes the top half of the body, and so arms and hands and the head. Can you guess what we will learn today? We are going to learn how to draw a full body portrait. And yes, and inside that, we are going to also learn poses. So first, let me introduce you to full body portraits. The name is self-explanatory, so you already know what it means. A full body portrait means a drawing of a character's whole body. Also, because it's a portrait, the character would have some sort of pose, like the example images on the slide. So the first image is this character holding some drinks and a phone, and then with headphones, and then in this pose with one of her legs in front. And then these are a lot of full body portrait poses. This for the second image. This is a character wearing like sweatpants and with long hair that's tied up. And here you can see a lot of different poses. And then here's another one. This is also a full body portrait, so that includes the character's entire body. There are a few key parts to pay attention to when you're drawing a cartoon portrait. So I've summed it up into four categories, which are proportions, structure and shape, pose, and details. So let's start with proportions. I briefly introduced this last class, so I will do a quick recap. So proportion means the sizes of different body parts compared to each other. So in these example images, you can see they did like a measurement of these characters, like how many heads they are, and this is like an adult male, adult female, and children. This is a 10-year-old, 6 years old, 3 year old. And you can see they all have different proportions. So generally, when someone is younger, their head would be bigger. That's an example of proportion. And different proportions can show different ages, as I've just said, and different personalities. Just like facial features can show different personalities. So in this image, there are different characters with different proportions. This like character has a bigger head. This character has a square shaped face and like a full and round top body. This character is more skinny, and then this character has wide shoulders. And you can kind of guess the character's personalities based on their proportions. And also in comic drawing, because we are drawing comics, you can exaggerate the proportions depending on the style you are going for. So this example image at the top right shows a character with realistic proportions going to more exaggerated proportions. The next part to pay attention to is structure and shape. I also briefly introduced this last class for our half-body portraits, but I will add on to it because we're not only drawing half a body, but we're drawing the entire body. So structure and shape would also be important. And the entire body also includes the leg and feet. So I will also talk about that. So to recap, there are three major parts of the human body, which are, and as you can see on this image, the head, the chest, and the hips. So these three major parts are where the weight is on the human body. And other than that, there are also connectors or joints. So those are parts of the human body that connects the three major parts together, and it also allows us to move. So for example, the neck, you can move the neck like up and down, like rotate it. Also the shoulders, the elbows, and the wrists that also allow us to move. And then the hips, and the knees, the legs, and then the ankles. And also, you have small connectors on your fingers, small joints on your fingers, and that's why your finger can move a lot. So those are connectors and joints. And that is the basic structure of the human body. Now for shape, last class we looked at the shape of arms and hands, and we looked at how the arm is like two parts, and the hand, so the different lengths of fingers versus the palm, things like that. Now let's look at the shape of the legs. So different characters can have different leg shapes in this example image with the red drawings. So these are different leg shapes, and different characters can have like different leg shapes. For example, this one's more like a triangle. This one is skinny. This one's very curved. This one's small, big, etc. But generally, legs are two cylinders connected together. So this example image in the bottom, you can see this is like the basic structure. So here is the two parts of the legs, and then the knees and the feet. And then on the second image, second drawing on this image, you can see now this is the shape of the legs. So here are two cylinders connected by the knees, and then at the bottom, there's a feet. And yeah, so that is the shape of the legs and feet. Now, remember what we learned about joints and what I just said about joints? Well, once you put these joints in action, you can show gestures. And gestures are like poses that show movement. So they can be poses or they can be like poses while moving. And on this slide, you can see a lot of example images of stickman drawings. So last class, we learned about stickman drawings and how they can show gestures. So on the image, there are a lot of different gestures. This series is dancing, this one is also dancing, and this one has a lot of different poses. So for our full body portrait today, we're not going to draw like big movements like running or like big action poses yet, but we can still use the stickman drawings to draw expressive poses for our characters. So poses are the third part to pay attention to when drawing full body portraits because different poses can show different personalities. On this first example image, you can see this character with the arms out, like this pose. The character looks friendly because, when you have your arms out, it's kind of like a hug. And then this character, like with the glasses and like having the finger pointing up, like, oh, I know, this whatever. This character looks knowledgeable and like smart. And we also have this character at the bottom that also looks friendly because the character is shaking hands with another character, and maybe this character likes to read or is holding a map, and this character is tired. So different poses can show different personalities, just like facial features. Now that we know the major parts of drawing a full body portrait, let's get into a few details. So let's first look at clothing. When you're drawing clothes on your character, you have to pay attention to the shape of the clothing. So you can see these example images of these characters with different clothing and different hairstyles, of course. Like they have the same poses, but their clothing is different. So you can observe the different shapes of different types of clothing. So for example, like this t-shirt, the sweater, jeans, these short pants, and here, like these different types of like sweaters and like denim jackets. There is something else to notice on clothing. When you're wearing a long sleeve sweater and when you bend your arms, does the sweater still look flat? So you can try it on camera like this. Let's see it. So this part of the sweater is not flat when you bend your arm because the fabric on our clothing folds differently when we make different poses. So for example, what I just showed you, when I bend my arms, this part of the clothing, there are many folds over here, and then this part is smooth. So with different poses, the fabric of the clothing also makes different folds. And when you're drawing, you can show that by drawing a few lines on your character's clothing. So like in the example image here, with this character that is wearing a sweater, the artist drew a few lines just to show like how the different folds of the sweater. So for example here, like droopy and also folds, and then this one pulls, and then this one pulled up. And of course, you don't have to be extremely detailed because we're drawing like comics and cartoons, but you can draw a line or two to like just represent the folds, and that can make your drawings look more interesting. Another detail to pay attention to is line art. So here are two examples of line art in full body portraits. You can see the images. So this artist is using different line thicknesses to show weight. So for example, the clothing here, this is where the cloth ends. So it would be like kind of in the shadows, and there will be some weight on the clothing. So the artist used like a thicker line here to show the shadow or the weight, and also on the pants, like these clothing folds, and at the bottom of the shoes and the bottom of the skateboard. And the artist, the other image, like this artist, the other artist, also shows overlapping. So overlapping is when like something goes in front of something else or behind something else. And the artist shows overlapping when this character puts their hands in their pockets, or when the pants fold on top of the shoes, and when this arm is behind, kind of behind the body. So the artist shows this by just, like the artist will not draw the line on top of like the pants, the hand lines of the hands, if the hand is inside like the pants, inside the pockets. So here the artist shows overlapping. Now those are the four key parts to pay attention to when you are drawing half body portraits. So to summarize, there are proportions, which are the sizes of different body parts compared to each other. And the second, we have structure and shape, which is how the body works, structure, and the shapes of different body parts. And we also covered poses. So then we looked at stickman drawings as like a base for gestures. And then finally, we looked at details, which are clothing and overlapping. Okay, so now that we know and understand how to draw a full body portrait, now we know how to do that. But sometimes we can still struggle with drawing something. So for example, we can maybe like I will know how to draw a specific hand pose in a specific angle, or I don't know how to I won't know how to draw some sort of clothing. Now, how many of you have used references before? So whether that's a photo or real life observation, so if you used reference photos, give me a show of hands by clicking on the raise hand button. 那个让他们问. So last class, we covered using references and observing people. This is a very helpful tip, so I want to remind you of it. So if you're struggling with drawing a character, and sometimes I struggle too, well, you can either observe yourself in the mirror, so make the same pose as the character you're trying to draw, or take a photo of yourself, or search up a photo online if you can't take a photo of yourself. And use those photos or real life people or yourself as a reference, just like the examples on the slide. So this artist shows a lot of his drawings versus his references, and you can see how the artist uses the reference to help him draw like the different folds, the clothing folds, and the proportions and clothing and things like that. But the artist also exaggerates the drawing, so not making it exactly exactly realistic, but still using the references to help him draw. So references are really helpful if you are struggling to draw something, or if you just want to make your drawing, like if you need some help drawing. Now it's time for our workshop. Today we will each draw a full body portrait of ourselves. Before you get started, I want to show you my example, and I want to show you the steps as a guide for you. First, I created a light stickman sketch to set the pose and mark the structure of my body. Here are the major blocks. The major blocks are the head, the chest, the hips, the hands, and the feet. So I use this stickman drawing to set my gesture or pose. Second, I adjusted the proportions, so it's different from this drawing because I made the legs a bit longer, so I adjusted stuff and sketched out the major shapes. So the major shapes here are the hair, the sweater, the pants, and the shoes. Next, I sketched the details. So here you can see I sketched the facial expressions, the sunglasses, I added accessories and the sketchbook here, and I also added some details on the shoes. Then I outlined my drawing and erased the pencil lines. I also used different line thicknesses. So for example, here at the bottom of the pants and like somewhere here on the hair. And finally, I added some details. So I did a black and white drawing this time because I found a marker that is almost dried out, but is not completely dried out. So I thought it would add a nice touch to a black and white drawing. So in this final step, I added some details, for example, to the hair to make it look shiny, and like colored the sunglasses black and the sketchbook black. And I also drew some clothing folds here, and finally added some sparkles here. Here are some more examples of the steps to drawing a full body portrait. So first, the artist sketched out the major shapes of the body, and there are different shapes for different characters. So for example, this one is like a rectangle, this one's like a pear, a triangle, these different shapes and blobs. And then the artist sketched out like the character and the details and used different facial expressions, different clothings, and a lot of accessories on this one for the characters. And finally sketched out the details and inked. And you can see all of these characters, they have like very unique and distinctive personalities. And now you know how the artist created this. So by proportions, facial features, and poses. Now it's drawing time. Grab your pencil, paper, markers, pens, whatever you have, and let's get started drawing.